Carys Ellison grew up surrounded by dust, grease, and silence. At 13, while other girls were thinking about parties or sports, she crossed the city with a lunch container in her hands, just to make sure her mother didn't eat alone in the middle of the crane noise. She was called the cleaner's daughter by people who never even bothered to learn her name. She heard jokes, endured sideways glances, and quietly collected small humiliations no one ever noticed. But behind that simple uniform and sharp gaze, there was a secret, a gift, something even she didn't realize had power. Until the day everything stopped, until the engineers failed. And, without knowing it, an invisible girl became the only hope for a multi-million-dollar construction site. What happened next, no one could have seen coming. It was one of those stifling days in Toledo, Ohio, when the sun seemed set on punishing the working class. Carys Ellison, wearing worn-out sneakers and an old backpack, walked with purpose toward the construction site where her mother worked. The smell of fresh concrete mixed with machine oil followed her from the gate. She was only 13, but she knew that place like the backyard of her own home. Every single day, at the same time, she delivered a carefully packed lunch to her mom, wrapped in a floral cloth filled with more love than ingredients. Imelda Ellison, her mother, was known around there as the Grease Shadow. It was like the nickname had become part of her uniform, soaked into the fabric just like the oil itself. Imelda didn't seem to care. Or maybe she just pretended not to. She worked hard, kept her eyes down, and never responded to the workers' jokes. Every day, when the noon bell rang, she'd find a dusty corner, sit on a makeshift wooden plank, and wait for her daughter. It was a quiet ritual, invisible, almost sacred. But that day, something was about to break the routine. Carys arrived with quick steps, trying to dodge the mocking stares of some of the workers. "Here comes the grease princess," one of them shouted, making the others laugh. She didn't reply. She learned early on that some insults lose power when ignored. But inside, every word stung. Humiliation is a silent beast that settles deep in your chest. She pretended it didn't hurt, but it did. With every laugh, a lump grew in her throat. Still, she smiled when she saw her mom. "Brought roasted chicken. Your favorite," she whispered. Imelda smiled, grateful, like she'd just been handed something precious. Mother and daughter sat down as always. But before they could take the first bite, a deafening sound sliced through the air. Something metallic, loud, urgent. An alarm blared. Dust filled the air. The workers started running in every direction. One of the cranes had jammed. The hydraulic machine stopped mid-process. An unexpected, dangerous malfunction. The lead engineer stared at the control panel like he was trying to read a foreign language. Carys watched it all with laser focus. The men shouted, waved their arms, made frantic calls, trying everything except listening. No one knew what to do. "Shut all down," someone yelled. "Call the supervisor," said another. But nothing worked. Carys, still in the same spot, kept her eyes on the machine. Something about that gear system looked familiar, like she'd seen it before. Her mind worked quietly, in contrast to the chaos around her. Imelda, alarmed, grabbed her daughter's hand. "It's dangerous. Stay close to me." But Carys wasn't hearing her anymore. Something inside her had been awakened. The truth is, without even realizing it, that girl carried a secret. A hidden talent, shaped during quiet afternoons watching educational videos on the school-issued tablet. She didn't know that what she was learning had a name, knowledge. She just loved seeing how machines worked on the inside, how every button had a purpose. And right there, in that hot and noisy construction site, her mind was moving faster than the frantic men around her. "Mom, that machine, it looks like one I saw the other day," she murmured. Imelda frowned, not quite grasping what her daughter meant. The manager arrived out of breath, looking for techs. "Where's the manual? Who programmed this thing?" he shouted, wiping sweat from his forehead. The site was at a full stop. Time, as always, meant money. And the money behind this project had a name: Malcolm Travers, the millionaire investor. He rarely showed up, but word was he owned everything there, even mistakes. If the losses reached him, someone would be out of a job. No one wanted to take the fall, but without knowing it, they were about to find the answer in the last place they'd ever look. Carys kept her eyes locked on the machine. Her heart was pounding, not out of fear but from something else. It felt like the gears were speaking to her, calling for someone who wasn't afraid to try. She recognized that type of interface. She'd seen panels just like it in countless online tutorials. Mom always said never to mess with things unless you're asked, she thought. But what if no one asks? What if no one knows what to do? Maybe, just maybe she could try. It was just an idea. Or maybe the beginning of something bigger. The jokes had stopped. The workers exchanged confused glances, still hoping a real specialist would show up. But none came. Tension buzzed through the air. Imelda clutched the untouched lunch in her hands, now forgotten. And Carys, standing now, stared at the machine with a mix of awe and familiarity. What if I actually knew how to fix this? She wondered. The thought grew inside her like a seed that only needed a single gesture, a step forward, an ounce of courage. Because sometimes the most powerful lessons come in complete silence. And in that very moment, with everything stuck, a decision was forming. It wasn't normal. It wasn't expected, but it was real. A spark in the middle of chaos. What if Carys really dared? What could happen if someone like her stepped up to that control panel, like she already knew it? The gears didn't know. The workers didn't either. But something was about to change, drastically. The confusion kept building. Shouts flew across the job site like loose nails. Shut it down. Call headquarters. Get the tech from last week. Sweat dripped down the supervisor's face as he tried to look in control. But the truth was, they were lost. The machine that had stalled was a cutting-edge welding unit imported from Norway, only operable through a system no one there truly understood. The manual? Written in technical German. The original engineer? Let go 3 days ago. It was like standing in front of a silent monster. And the monster didn't listen to anyone. Within minutes, they called in 3 techs from a local service company. All experienced, all expensive, but none of them could even get past the first screen on the panel. The system was frozen, and any wrong command could make it worse. The project leads whispered nervously. The losses were already past $25,000, and the clock wasn't slowing down. This could shut the site down for a week, one worker muttered. What if the millionaire hears about this? Whispered another. Malcolm Trevor's name resurfaced, now more feared than the machine itself. While the men walked in circles, trying to look useful, Carys stayed seated next to her mother. Her eyes locked on the panel. She wasn't pretending to know. She knew. Without even realizing its worth, she had absorbed full-length videos about industrial machinery during her quiet moments of rest. A curiosity no one had ever encouraged, but that had grown wild on its own, like weeds pushing through cracks in concrete. That startup screen, I've seen it before, she murmured, leaning in slightly for a better view. Imelda, though tense, noticed a spark in her daughter's eyes. It was different, like someone recognizing an old friend in a crowd. The machine had a modular system, something obvious to trained or curious eyes. Carys saw that a few cables were plugged in the wrong way. 2 sensors were caked with dust and grease, and the safety button had been locked, blocking any restart attempt. But nobody noticed these details. They were too busy blaming each other. And right there, in the middle of that technical and emotional chaos, sat a girl with a powerful secret racing through her mind. She knew what to do. Or, at the very least, she knew where to start. One of the techs kicked a rock in frustration and stormed off. This piece of junk won't respond. Poor programming, he muttered. Another suggested contacting the manufacturer. It would take days. The supervisor rubbed his eyes like he was trying to wake up from a nightmare. The interim engineer shook his head, mumbling, "We're screwed." And no one, not a single person, thought to ask if anyone, by any chance, watched engineering tutorials in their free time. After all, who would have time for that? Certainly not the janitor's daughter. And that was the problem. Prejudice jammed harder than any machine. Carys whispered again, "It's just like the one from Wednesday's video." Imelda looked at her in surprise. "Video?" The girl nodded. "From an engineering channel. The guy showed how to reset one of these. It was blue too, just a newer panel." Her mother frowned, uneasy. "Sweetie, don't even think about getting involved. They barely let us be here as it is. But Carys wasn't listening anymore. Her thoughts were racing. She was already building the solution in her head, step by step, piece by piece. At the far end of the construction site, Malcolm Travers, the millionaire who owned everything there, had shown up quietly. He was silent, watching from a distance. Without anyone knowing, everyone was being observed, even those who weren't technically part of the crew. Chaos is a magnifying glass. He wore a dark blazer, glasses, and walked like someone who always held the reins, even when things fell apart. "Has anyone fixed it yet?" he asked one of the engineers. "Not yet, sir," they replied. "We're working on it." But nothing was working, mostly because no one imagined the answer would come from the very last person they'd expect. "What if no one fixes it?" the supervisor asked, his voice cracking. "We could lose the entire week, maybe even the contract." Voices grew louder, gestures more frantic. With every failed attempt, tension coiled tighter like a spring about to snap. The machine, lifeless, almost seemed to mock them all. A shiny, expensive symbol of collective failure. And right then, when no one else believed there was a way out, Carys stood up slowly, looked at her mother, and spoke the words that would silence the entire site just minutes later. "Mom, I know how to make this work." Imelda's eyes widened. "Carys, no," but it was too late. The girl had already taken a step forward. It wasn't courage, not yet. It was impulse, a burning urgency in her chest, as if the whole world depended on that one gesture. As if, without knowing it, she carried the most powerful lesson of the day within her. Because sometimes the answer isn't where people are looking. Or, better yet, it's in the person no one is looking at. And right at that moment, under the watchful eyes of nervous men, arrogant technicians, and a silent millionaire, an invisible girl chose to make herself heard. The silence that followed Carys' question was so heavy it drowned out even the sound of idle machines. "Can I try?" she asked, her voice steady, steadier than any adult's in that moment. Heads turned slowly, as if someone had just told an inappropriate joke. Then came the laughter, dry, mean, soaked in condescension. "You? A little girl? Go play with dolls," one of the techs scoffed, swinging a wrench in his hand with smug confidence. The supervisor didn't say a word. He just chuckled, as if to say, "This is grown-up stuff, kid." Imelda felt her face flush. She wanted to grab her daughter and drag her out of there. It wasn't fair. Not after all the humiliation, all the swallowed silence. "Let's go home, Carys," she whispered. But the girl didn't move. Her eyes were glued to the machine's panel, as if it had called her name. "She's joking, right?" one of the workers muttered, trying to stifle a laugh. But she wasn't. This wasn't a joke. It was instinct, or maybe fate. Because sometimes you just know what you need to do. And you do it. The manager, sweating through his collar, glanced at his watch. 3 minutes of downtime had already cost him a fortune. He didn't believe the girl could pull it off. But he had nothing left to lose. 5 minutes, he muttered, defeated. If she breaks it more, it won't make much difference. And with that kind of permission, disguised as indifference, Carys walked up to the machine. Every step was followed by sneers and raised eyebrows. But she didn't shrink. She didn't flinch. She just opened her backpack, pulled out a clean cloth, the same one she used to wipe her tablet screen, and stared at the panel like it was an old friend. Her fingers, still small, started wiping down the side sensors, caked in layers of dust and grease. The men glanced at each other, puzzled. Then she pressed the reset button and held it for 7 seconds, exactly as she'd learned in the video. The screen flickered. A loading bar appeared. "What's she doing?" someone whispered. The interim engineer frowned. Did she lock it up even more? But then, something happened. The machine's lights came back on. The software of the operating system rebooting echoed through the site, and the motors began to spin. 3 minutes. That's all it took. 3 minutes for the girl no one took seriously to do what 5 trained adults couldn't. The panel came back to life, the hydraulic arm reset, and the cutting program appeared, ready to go. The engineer's eyes went wide. That's impossible without internal access. Carys calmly wiped her hands on the cloth. It wasn't impossible. You just had to press the right button at the right time and clean the sensors. They were blind. She said it like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. But in that moment, she had become a legend. The workers stood in silence. Some were embarrassed, others angry for being outdone by a girl. Most, though, were simply stunned. The silence had changed. It wasn't the silence of humiliation anymore. It was the silence of revelation. Without even realizing it, that girl had just become something of a miracle on that job site. She saved the day, someone murmured. The manager, still dizzy from the whole thing, looked at the supervisor. Make a note of this. That girl's going to save us thousands. But the truth was, she'd already done something much bigger. She'd broken a paradigm. Imelda still couldn't believe what she'd witnessed. She clutched the lunch container to her chest like it could protect her from all that was happening. Carys walked back over. I'm hungry. Can I eat now? She asked casually. But her mother pulled her into a tight hug. A silent hug, filled with emotion and pride. A mix of fear, relief, and awe. This was more than a fix. It was a milestone, and at the same time, a risk. Because everyone had seen it. Everyone was talking. Everyone was judging. And a secret like that wasn't going to stay secret for long. From a distance, Malcolm Travers watched everything unfold. Arms crossed, face unreadable, but his eyes said plenty. He didn't fully understand what he had just seen, but he knew how to recognize value when it appeared in front of him. And there was value here. In that girl. In that gesture. In that fearless look. It wasn't time to act. Not yet, he thought. But it was time to remember her name. Carys. Because, without meaning to, she had shaken more than just a machine. She had stirred up invisible structures, hierarchies, egos, class. All of it in just 3 minutes. And as the men slowly returned to their work, still stunned, and the dust began to settle, a quiet certainty grew inside the chest of that 13-year-old girl. She wasn't just the janitor's daughter anymore. She was someone who knew, someone who could, someone who, without even trying, had just changed the course of her life, and maybe the lives of everyone who would cross her path from then on. The job site felt like the world had paused for a few seconds. The motors started humming again, sensors lit up in sync, and the same technicians who had mocked her were now speechless. No one knew what to say. One of them took 2 steps forward, as if he were going to speak, but stopped himself. Carys, unaware of the full impact of what she had done, sat down next to her mom, opened her lunch, and finally started to eat. Are you okay? Imelda asked, still emotional. The girl nodded. The food's good, and so's the machine. The interim engineer was the first to break the silence. He walked over slowly, still in shock. How did you do that? He asked. Carys shrugged. I watch assembly videos on my tablet. Every day. Her answer, so plain and honest, hit like a slap to the pride of everyone who had dismissed her. That was it. A habit? A quiet secret no one thought mattered? The manager, still trying to make sense of it all, glanced at the supervisor. Then he sighed and motioned to Carys. Come with me. Now. She hesitated, but Imelda nodded. And together, they entered the small, improvised office. Inside, the room was cramped and stuffy, but the tension was even thicker. The manager sat behind a desk buried in paperwork and pointed to the chair across from him. How old are you? He asked. 13. He made a surprised noise, like he was trying to hide his embarrassment. Listen, I can't hire you. That'd be illegal, but I might be able to do something else. He paused, long enough to build suspense. I could get you into a summer internship program. It's not usual for someone your age. But then again, you're not exactly usual. And right there, between stacks of work orders, a brand new door cracked open. But she's 13, someone shouted from outside the office, having overheard the conversation. And she already understands industrial logic better than half the team, the manager replied, with a rare tone of conviction. Carys looked at her mother. Can I do it? Imelda held back her tears with all her strength. The world seemed to be spinning too fast for her to process. Her daughter, the same little girl who grew up playing with broken tools, was now being recognized in a place where women, especially poor women, were usually invisible. It felt like watching the impossible unfold right in front of her. The gossip started immediately. Oh, just because she's the janitor's daughter, some scoffed. This is going to cause problems. Others, in silence, felt ashamed of having laughed at her just moments before. But the lesson had already been taught. Without knowing it, Carys had confronted something much bigger than gears and buttons. She had faced the unspoken rules of exclusion, and she won. With intelligence, with grace, without yelling. The only thing she ever raised was her hand, and that turned out to be more powerful than any technical explanation. That afternoon, Carys received her first temporary badge. It was symbolic, but no one dared to laugh. She took a photo in front of the machine she had fixed. The image spread through company WhatsApp groups like wildfire, and soon the story reached the entire city. A retired engineer wrote, "In 30 years on the job, I've never seen anything like it." Others commented, "Some people study their whole lives and never learn what that girl showed us in 3 minutes." Her unexpected fame was growing fast, but Carys wasn't dazzled. She was still just a girl who brought lunch to her mom. The next day, Malcolm Travers personally had a card delivered to her, hand-signed. "Congratulations. Intelligence has no age, no address." It was a simple phrase, but powerful. And coming from someone like him, the quiet millionaire who owned everything and everyone there, it felt like a medal. The news spread. The town talked. Carys' school organized a tribute. And, without her knowing, an invitation was already on its way. One that would take her far beyond the city limits and way past anything anyone could have imagined. Carys began visiting the construction site 3 times a week. She shadowed engineers, asked questions, took notes. She was like a sponge, absorbing everything without effort. What seemed complicated to others came naturally to her. "You think like someone born with logic in their DNA," one supervisor told her. She smiled shyly, but stored every word like treasure. Meanwhile, Imelda was promoted to an internal department. She now had set hours, full benefits, and, most of all, respect. And all of it, because on an ordinary day, her daughter brought her lunch and unknowingly changed everything. But it wasn't all perfect. Some people frowned. They called it luck, said it was just coincidence. People who couldn't handle the sight of a humble girl stepping into spaces once reserved for men in suits. But Carys was a fast learner, not just about machines, about life, about what it cost to shine. And little did she know that on the other side of the state, an advanced learning center was quietly following her story. Without warning, the letter arrived, sealed in a silver-stamped envelope, printed on official letterhead. It was an invitation, addressed to Carys Ellison, signed by the director of the Detroit Advanced Center for Technological Development, a high-level educational program for youth with above-average logical reasoning. "We've been following your story. We'd love for you to join our summer program, with full scholarship and personalized guidance." Imelda read it twice, just to be sure. Carys, sitting beside her, said nothing. Sometimes destiny shouts, and sometimes it only whispers. But when it whispers the name of someone humble, the entire world seems to listen. The story made front-page news in the local paper. 13-year-old girl fixes industrial machine and is invited to elite center in Detroit. It was more than an achievement. It shattered expectations. In hallways where once there had been sneers, now there was pride. "Did you see Imelda's daughter? That girl's a genius." But what no one knew, or pretended not to know, was that none of it would have happened if an invisible girl hadn't dared to act when everyone else froze. No mentor, no degree, no special access, no idea the world was watching. Her internship became a reference point. Other girls started applying. Carys became a symbol of a new generation. She was invited to speak at public schools, sharing her story with simplicity. "I just wanted to bring my mom some lunch. I swear I didn't plan any of this." And that's what moved people the most. She wasn't after fame. She wasn't chasing approval. She just wanted to help, to understand the world. And without even knowing it, she had taught a lesson no engineering manual could ever explain. Imelda, in turn, experienced something she never had before: stability. The company gave her a permanent job inside, with full benefits and job security. Not out of pity, but out of respect. What she had done for that site, quietly with sweat and sacrifice, was finally visible. And more than that, it was respected. At a team lunch, Malcolm Travers himself shook her hand and addressed her by name. "Mrs. Ellison, congratulations on your daughter, and on never giving up." It was the only time Imelda, ever cried in public. But no one laughed. Social media lit up with the story. Influencers shared the photo of Carys standing next to the machine. The most liked caption read, "The janitor's daughter taught the world how to reboot." And that's exactly what happened. The machine rebooted. But so did dignity. Perspective. The way we measure human worth. Behind the scenes, organizations began serious conversations about including more girls in technical fields. And all of it because of a girl who hadn't even finished middle school, but who carried within her a kind of vision not even millionaires could buy. What's most beautiful is that Carys never changed who she was. She remained the same curious girl, with a shy laugh, who cleaned her glasses with the edge of her shirt and asked questions that made engineers squirm. Why does the panel lock up with dust if it's made for construction sites? Why don't they train people before installing stuff like this? Her questions turned into projects, and little by little, those projects became real solutions. Even the technicians, once doubtful, began listening more. Some even started calling her the little engineer. There was something curious about Carys's journey. She never spoke about revenge. She didn't carry bitterness. But anyone who looked into her eyes could tell she had won. She had defeated the laughter, the judgment, the humiliation, the system, all without fighting back, without shouting, just by being who she was, just by doing what she knew, just by trying to help. And that, in itself, was revolutionary. Because sometimes the real revenge is recognition. And the greatest justice is to be fully seen, not for where you come from, but for everything you've built through effort. Today, Carys Ellison is a junior mentor in the Girls Know It Too program, designed for low-income girls interested in technology. Every week, she teaches about sensors, gears, software, and logic. But she also teaches about courage. If no one gives you a space, make your own. And if no one believes in you, believe enough for both of you. In every class, there's always at least one girl with that same spark in her eyes. And all of them want to be like her. But most importantly, they learn to be like themselves, and that alone is already more than enough. And it all started with a lunchbox, with a daughter, with a jam machine, and with a girl who carried a secret too beautiful to stay hidden. Because the world still needs people who notice what no one sees, who stand up even when no one asks, who turn the ordinary into something extraordinary without even realizing they're changing everything. If this story touched you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Your presence makes all the difference.